After 9 months of emotional turmoil and physical strain, Clara gave birth to a bouncing baby boy. She named him Elijah, a name that symbolized strength and hope, qualities she knew she would need to raise him. For a while, the arrival of the baby seemed to soften Rachel. She doted on Elijah, often cradling him in her arms and whispering words of devotion. But as the weeks turned into months, Clara noticed a change in Rachel's demeanor. Rachel began staying out late, returning home with the smell of alcohol on her breath and the faint scent of unfamiliar perfume clinging to her clothes. Soon she started bringing different women to their cottage, introducing them as friends, but making no effort to hide her indiscretions. The women would come and go, their laughter echoing through the small house as Clara tried to shield Elijah from the chaos. One evening, after putting Elijah to bed, Clara confronted Rachel. "What are you doing?" she demanded, her voice trembling with anger and hurt. "We have a child now. You're supposed to be here for him, for us." Rachel's eyes flashed with irritation. "Don't lecture me," she snapped. "I've given you everything. This house, this life, and this is how you repay me. By nagging me?" When Clara persisted, Rachel's temper flared. She began to belittle Clara, criticizing everything from her appearance to her parenting skills. The emotional abuse soon escalated to physical intimidation. Clara found herself walking on eggshells, doing everything she could to keep Rachel from exploding, all while trying to protect Elijah from the toxic environment. What Clara didn't know was that Rachel was battling her own demon. Years earlier, she had undergone cosmetic surgery to transition from male to female, a decision born out of a deep desire to escape her past and embrace her true identity. But the years had taken their toll, and the procedures began to fail. One day, Rachel collapsed at home, her body racked with pain. Clara, despite everything, rushed her to the hospital. The doctors informed Clara that Rachel's condition was severe. The complications from the cosmetic surgery had led to a series of infections that would require extensive and costly treatment. As Rachel's health deteriorated, she became a shadow of her former self. Her once commanding presence reduced to frailty. Clara cared for her out of a sense of duty and compassion, but the resentment lingered. Meanwhile, Elijah grew into a bright and curious little boy. By the time he started primary school, his intelligence and charm had captured the hearts of everyone he met. He developed a fondness for books and often visited the local bookstore, where Mark still worked. Unaware of Elijah's true parentage, Mark took an immediate liking to the boy. Elijah reminded him of Clara in ways he couldn't quite place: your warmth, her curiosity, her gentle spirit. One day, while browsing the shelves, Mark struck up a conversation with Elijah. "You're here a lot," he said with a smile. "Do your parents like to read too?" Elijah hesitated before answering. "My mom loves books. She used to work in a bookstore like this." Intrigued, Mark asked more questions, and Elijah, in his innocence, offered to introduce him to his mother. Mark agreed, curious but cautious. When Mark arrived at the small cottage with Elijah, he was unprepared for the sight that greeted him. Clara stood in the doorway, her eyes widening in shock as she recognized her ex-husband. Behind her, Rachel, gaunt, pale, and visibly unwell, sat, slumped in a chair, barely able to lift her head. Mark's gaze shifted from Clara to Elijah and back again. The resemblance was undeniable. "Clara," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Is he?" Clara nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, Mark. He's yours, in a way." "Rachel," she faltered, struggling to find the words. Mark took a step forward, his expression a mix of anger and pity. "I need to know everything," he said. Over the next hour, Clara poured out the story: the betrayal, the abuse, the birth of Elijah, and the years of suffering she had endured. Mark listened in silence, his emotions warring within him. When she finished, he looked at Rachel, who met his gaze with a weak, defiant smile. "You've done enough," Mark said to her. "It's time for you to let go." Rachel's illness worsened in the following weeks, and she eventually passed away. Her death left Clara with mixed emotions: relief, sadness, and a sense of liberation. Mark, moved by Clara's resilience and the bond he had formed with Elijah, extended a hand of forgiveness. "Come home," he said one evening as they sat together, watching Elijah play. "Let's start over. For him, for us." Clara's heart swelled with gratitude. "Are you sure?" she asked. "After everything?" Mark took her hand in his. "I'm sure. We can't change the past, but we can build a future together." And so Clara and Elijah moved back into the home they had once shared with Mark. The road to rebuilding their family was not without its challenges, but together they found healing and happiness. Mark adopted Elijah as his own, and the three of them created a life filled with love, laughter, and second chances. As they sat together one evening reading stories by the fire, Clara realized that despite the twists and turns of her journey, she had finally found her happily ever after. Life with Mark was a stark contrast to the years Clara had spent with Rachel. Mark's steady presence brought a sense of stability to their lives.